Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we have ourselves 6 tracks off of an album from an act named MaeBeaNot, titled The End Never Leaves. And if we switch over to here, the first of these, titled Happiness is a Foreign Concept. I've actually reviewed tracks off of this album before. I'll put the link in the description for those previous videos, but this will be checking out, if I'm not mistaken, the first 6 tracks. So it's a bit of an interesting situation here. I could be wrong. We're going to listen through these tracks from start to finish though, and we're going to hear what we think. With Happiness is a Foreign Concept, let's go. Got a sort of trippy psychedelic feel to it. I mean, it sounds like a nightmarish fever dream. Oscillations and then noise. And that sub bass, that push is interesting as well from a production perspective. Yeah, it's I mean, they could be extremely distorted vocal takes. I'm gonna probably have to put an epilepsy warning at the start of this. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to put an epilepsy warning at the start of this, eh? That's not a complaint, by the way. It's just, yeah, it's just keeping an eye out for people who might come across the video. I like my video, I mean. So how do we discuss happiness as a foreign concept? Because in these end of track sections, I'm going to be providing an overall song analysis from lyrics and vocals all the way through to production, and I'll be giving an overall conclusion at the end of all the different tracks. My thoughts on those, just as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general listener's perspective. But the song titled Happiness as a Foreign Concept as an instrumental sort of sounds to me like it's almost discussing just how foreign happiness is to them. It's incredibly impressive. It's one of the most antithetical musical experiences I've listened to or been a part of, because it's trying to not be a song so much as it's trying to be, I suppose, raw and unstructured and very kind of affecting, if that makes sense. Like, it's trying to make you uncomfortable and be a deliberately, I think, uncomfortable listen there, to sort of emphasize, again, as I've said, just how unknown. I think the lack of vocals allow you to kind of make up your own sort of like idea of what the song is about, even though the music itself is quite blatant or in that approach. You just have this incredibly unsettling, kind of weird, trippy oscillation of wow, wow, wow. So there's a synth layer going up and up and up, and there's actually quite respectable production chops shown on display here to get the LFO and very sort of like the speed of those turns to go up over time. To automate those is very clever. It's just, we clearly understand how to use different synthesizers and electronic instruments to get the tones we want. It's also like the positioning of things on the sides of the stereo field there, the notes, but we're not trying to make chord progressions or bass lines insofar as I think we're trying to make music that adds notes to pay attention to. They're like voices or someone speaking to you in a mix, and then you kind of get the other side of the hellscape on the other end, sort of like speaking back. Around the 25-28 minute mark, where things are just this like high kind of shimmers or sheens there, and you've got that continued reverberation there. It's claustrophobic, especially with some of the bass responses that you have later on, the kind of the way the track pushes because of the low end and the frequency spectrum there. You can really feel the music there. It's incredibly interesting. And other little sort of like dusty kind of shackles and sort of like glitchy elements around the 45-second mark there just add different textures and timbres to the piece there and allow it to adapt. But you could like click on any part of the song and have a relatively different experience, because I think primarily the aim of this track is to maybe show the evolution of this concept of happiness of being a foreign concept. If I remember correctly from MaeBeaNot's previous tracks I reviewed, this is a similar kind of approach they have across their music. I could be wrong, I could be misremembering, but we have lots of chord choices as well that are kind of dissonant and sort of like almost disdainful of the listener. Like, we have these diminished and kind of tritonal chord choices there, and even though they have reverb tails to kind of take a bit of the bite out of the texture of them, they still sit there in the ether, and it's kind of repugnant, but it's also so kind of spooky and uncertain, like unusual, in that it's almost kind of got that space because of the panning, the heavy use of reverb decisions. It sounds like it's far away, and then when you get to that part where the track kind of kind of like, the video goes dark, and then you've got like things kind of rolling down to the low end, and then for things to kind of open up again at the end with just a really aggressive sound of distorted kind of vocal chops there. I think it's confrontational there. It really is almost like you have a moment to pause and then you just have an outburst, and that's what you have. I genuinely feel like this could even, I'm not being facetious, this could legitimately be a social experiment to see how people sort of cope and orientate around this, I mean, you've got to hand it to MaeBeaNot. You've got parts where the filters open up. There are certain settings on those synthesizers, and you get more high end, and there's more of a buzz or a glow to it there. So you can tell they're making adjustments and that it's deliberate. But even some of the pseudo kind of orchestral elements there, you can hear strings in certain parts, but they've just been so heavily modulated and affected that they're an alien part of the piece. I do have to show an appreciation for the use of the wow, that kind of oscillation though, through a lot of the track though. It provides a rhythm in the piece there that isn't necessarily present elsewhere. I will show that we do, even if we don't play along to a metronome, so to speak, we are still trying to not just have an experience that is just hanging there. There are subtle changes, and I just think that's great. So structurally, I think it's quite effective, especially if you like this kind of music, if you like being a little bit unsettled with your tunes. And I honestly think if you close your eyes, especially as the track fades out around the 4-minute 10 mark, you're left in a position where you could have, again, a completely different experience with someone next to you. But I dare say not really a positive one, in the sense that you probably won't feel good afterwards. It's not like ASMR-ish and you have those kind of click kind of textures there that kind of sort of like scratch your brain a little bit. It's harsh. But I think, again, happiness is a foreign concept. When you combine those textures and timbres and note choices and instruments and effects changes and stuff like that, that makes sense in terms of what the music is trying to provide. So it's good, it's well connected. And again, I don't think we could have added vocals in a way that would have helped here. I just feel like as an isolated concept, it's good. And especially if this is the first track of the album, if I'm not misunderstanding, this is awesome. It's just really good for setting the tone and the pace of it immediately. And to have those incredibly heavily chipped up, kind of distorted crashes at the end there, it's just showing that we want to do some really hardcore stuff with this music there. It's showing that we don't even let the cymbals be pure. We could have potentially had like a change of sort of scene or mood with that part, but nope. For 200% the whole way. Studio recording, mixing and mastering. And given in mind what we've discussed here with the way that things have been produced, I genuinely feel like anything you hear within this is deliberate. So if there are resonant frequencies in like the low end, for example, that's because they are pushing that. If you have stuff sound asymmetrical on the sides of the stereo field, it's there to kind of be, again, antithetical to maybe a positive sort of like comfortable listening experience. The overdoing of any sort of like distortions or compressions or anything like that are deliberate as well. Typically though, I do actually think things are reasonably well leveled. There's a lot of dynamic range to the piece, and it's nice and loud with a bit of, not really pumping there, it's just pulsing, it's just writhing, dude. It's like an angry snake in a box. It's just, yeah, it's interesting music. It's a nice way to start a Wednesday. We've got even in silence, it's suffocating. Immediately different to the previous part is, oh. Yeah, that's wild, dude. Does like the audio-visual experience of watching the song kind of suck itself into itself like a black hole, and watching the actual visualizer do the same thing is very cool. I will grant that, that's very clever. And it's really cool that you can make music like this. Like, it's crescendoing, where are we headed, right? Did we get a flute and auto-tune it? Oh, that's... oof. Hang on. Sorry, I just thought, hang on a minute. I cannot tell you how unsettling it is, sincerely, to like be listening to a song like this and then suddenly you hear a noise in the room. Still don't know what it was. Like, no cap, I still don't know what it is. Was that in the song? No, I don't know what it was, but that was even in silence is suffocating. What a surreal experience. Again, no vocals with this one. It wasn't a situation where I think words would have necessarily helped us. I do like that this one, you know, I think even silence is suffocating. It's just kind of maybe just the feelings of heaviness that are choking the person. You know, it's a lot of the heaviness of those lows and mid ranges and how sort of again claustrophobic and chaotic and just full on a lot of these synth tones and textures are within the mix. Maybe even some of the quieter parts there where just you kind of are waiting and with anxiety for what's going to happen next. It just sounds, they should get into horror film scores, like for real. This is some really cool music. You have this kind of interesting, almost deceitful, really pretty sounding chorus pad thing at the start there. It sounds like a choir and it's so pretty sounding, and I like the chord that it chooses. Do-do-dum, do-do-do-dum. It's like a seventh or something like that, missing the third. I could be wrong, but just it's very pretty and it's nice and like upbeat after the intensity of happiness is a foreign concept, so it's almost like a palate cleanser a little bit. But then as you start going further with it, you hear it overlapping with itself, and then suddenly you get the bah, and it's just like, oh yeah, no, I understand, we're in the same album again. And as we move into like the 20-second mark or 27-second mark, for example, we have the kind of buzzing of like insects writhing in the background there. It's just very surreal. Again, we have this kind of romp, kind of like push and pull of the track there, playing with you a little bit, especially if you close your eyes and ideate. And part of that is because of the use of low and high pass filters there to kind of like play around with the way sounds are perceived, you know. Again, that's just a great use of synths and effects chains. But as we kind of build on the sides of the stereo field and from a 3D mixing perspective there, the music literally surrounds you in the headphones, and it's just overwhelming. It's very, and like after happiness is a foreign concept, you cannot trust that it's just going to be chill. So you know that something else is going to happen there. And but the thing is, because we've been so liberal and so free in terms of how we approach the sound design within this, you never know what. You could just have the bass on one side in the far corner, and the kind of like in the naughty chair, you can have like the kind of like riser around the 140 mark being incredibly over the top and just stressful sounding like that, you know. Even when you have like that kind of weird distorted glitchy flute tone at 155 or 53 when things aren't necessarily as intense, it kind of pushes out one side of the stereo field, presents itself in different ways, kind of like stims out a little bit, goes to the right side, and then kind of pops out. And you're like, what was that? Why did this happen? Are those the notes? It's like a demon going around your skull. And it just, it's like an engine dying or something like that. It's crazy. The moment we move into that arpeggiator around the 2:15 mark, and we kind of sounds like an ambulance going somewhere at 1,000,000 miles an hour. As you get more of those builds and more of those kind of zesty tones, you're just kind of left with a feeling of dread that does sound suffocating. So it's almost like, I don't know how to describe it from a perspective of maybe someone got sick, so then they ended up in the ambulance and drove away, and then there was just like an endless kind of darkness afterwards. I mean, like, there's just so many ways you can interpret it. Again, that's the strength of instrumental music, is that it's not too blunt with the way it wants you to relate to it, approach it. But thematically, again, anything we put here was either diminished or minor sounding there. To be fair, the first part was kind of major, which was very pretty in the upper register, but it was You couldn't trust it. You kind of had to give it time to really spread its wings and see the barbs in them. But given this track was shorter than the last one, I think Happiness is a Foreign Concert was around 4 minutes, and this was 3. It just shows that we can do sort of slightly longer form stuff, whilst there's sort of 2 to 4 minute sweet spot stuff. Similar commentary, the music production there. I especially again liked the flute, the way that it was affected and sort of like I suppose manipulated, and the way that it spread with the automation across the side there, the way that it voiced itself there, and it really sort of like uncomfortable kind of like messy way was just really sick, really clever music, and ultimately, yeah, just really effective effort. Well done. Because we've got Nothing But a Heartbeat, track number 3 for today. I'm back into the 7th layer, I suppose. Great use of sub layers and main layers as well. I am listening for the heartbeat though. Though I suppose it's completely reasonable to not be too literal about that. Was that the heartbeat singular? It's just not comfortable, dude. Oh? No, it was nice for a moment. Oh, that was it? I'm sorry. We had like 3 minutes of dread, and then we have 30 seconds of nice stuff. I mean, that's okay. Maybe the heartbeat is when someone comes back to life and starts appreciating when they're alive again. Is that the kind of feel for it, if I'm not mistaken? But the track has a very similar start proceeding to it. It is through composed. All these tracks are through composed. You have that kind of cinematic boom with so another synth layer, and stuff's instantiated immediately, and you're put on the, you know, the mind card again. And I think a lot of this again is the audiovisual experience, looking at the particle physics and everything like that going across the screen, as well as listening to it. You get lost in it, dude. I think a lot of what makes MaeBeaNot's music really effective is the tension, the build and release there. You really have a kind of a slow grind there, a mild crescendo there, a steady crescendo there, where we kind of accelerando occasionally, but just we have these releases when we get those doof heartbeats there. And on that third one, I think that is the third time's a charm, that lucky moment there where things kind of explode and there's a bit of prettiness involved. But like when you listen to that 1 minute mark and you just got that brrr, kind of that drone over top, and even to be fair, when you have like the kind of keys and other colorful elements in like the 3 minute mark there, there's still like some droning notes there which make it seem kind of like, again, suffocating, so to speak. It's just that it's just still letting you know how screwed you are because of how it sounds there. How it kind of messes with your head a little bit with how heavy the sub bass is, and how like you're kind of sitting there in a constant sense of dread, not knowing what is going to happen next, just knowing that you've learned so far that it is going to be uncomfortable. And again, I have to sort of give love to MaeBeaNot for knowing how to make this stuff compelling, because, you know, some people, I mean, it's not going to be for everyone, but there'll be some people who are especially sort of sensitive to this, but like parts. And I think part of what makes this music work is simply that it doesn't stay too long on the one thing. It transitions between parts, and again at a steady pace there. And it's not the same loudness the entire time. It builds and goes in peaks and troughs there, so that makes it more exciting as well. It is really that massive kind of release though, that 3 minute mark, that illustrates maybe a bit of positivity in the turn of it, that the heartbeat is a good thing. It's almost like we're suggesting that up until this point we've been struggling to live. We've been struggling to appreciate our heartbeat there, and at that 3 minute mark maybe we've been doing some meditating or finding some respite, and we are back in the saddle, back into things. And I think there with the really pretty melodies and arpeggios there with the major leaning, it's just very satisfying there. Again, there are, as I mentioned, there's some droning overlapping notes which make it seem a little bit kind of discordant. Well, not necessarily discordant, just a little bit sort of like, you get the feeling you don't entirely trust it. But like outside of the pulses again of those heartbeats, those kind of like boof sounds with the heavy reverb tails on, they just expand through the mix. I like the sub-layering of those major parts as well, like it's like an undercurrent of positivity that's sort of unsure of itself. It kind of reminds me of the music at the end of Five Nights at Freddy's when Freddy catches you, that the version of Carmen they had with the music box there. It's very neat. Could be an allegory for like being like getting born or something like that, and like having that in your got a crib as a kid or something like that, I'm not sure, but either way, again, just another really well produced track with solid leveling, really atmospheric. That is basically the main core function of this music, is to be atmospheric. Very satisfied with this at the halfway point. It'll be good to check out more, because we have Dying Slowly and Solace, track number 4. What have we got ourselves into now? It would have taken so much time to get these processed like this as well, at these intervals. We must be using analog synthesizers. We must be manually turning the knobs. I got lost in it for a moment, to be fair, as I was drinking some water. I think when you turn off your analytical brain and sort of passively listen to it, it's sort of like, yeah. See, fundamentally, that was an appreciable, sensible decision in terms of chord progressions and the way they implemented that instrument there, despite how heavily affected it was. I think you need to hear some plucked instruments like a guitar in the background as well, which is kind of nice. Awesome. Fantastic. But that was dying slowly in solace. I mean, you have the start of the track there, which sounds like an absolute nightmare fuel with that key there. And it's kind of gristly sounding, and you can kind of understand there how the dying slowly occurs there. And I also appreciate the beauty of what's going on at the end. It's kind of suggesting, hey, we are actually happy now that we've died there. We're peaceful now. We're not struggling with the difficulties of our existence as much anymore. And like the kind of like the way that kind of pulse, that writhing, seething part at the like 12-second mark is put forward there. It's incredibly just, and we have like some key parts there which have interesting representations there. Like you can hear the original instruments before that was so kind of like stacked with like filters, and you know, I mentioned that I thought these were analog synthesizers, or the way they were doing it was through like actual changing the knobs in time with the music, irrespective of like, again, in digital audio workstation automation and stuff like that. I kind of stand by that. I feel like that would have been the more effective way to do it. If they have literally keyed in every single change here, or if they, I mean, to be fair, they could have just simply set up and gotten different envelopes for a synthesizer depending on which channel it was. But like, it's very impressive sound production there. It's a very unique sound that I haven't really heard much of before. But just to kind of go away from that harshness around the minute mark and kind of chapterize it, I think structurally is really cool. Even if it doesn't stay on what it is for long, the pitch shifts and it just becomes kind of, I mean, I know I keep sort of making sounds rather than saying words, but it's simply like it's just the quote-unquote vibe of it is so in tune and conscious, I suppose, of both the title as well as like it's difficult to write music like this. To people who are maybe a little bit less sort of like familiar with how making this kind of experimental sort of avant-garde stuff works, it's not, again, you have to remove a lot of what you know about songwriting and create and paint with sounds, you know, and make your own sounds and get them to sound coherent and functional with one another. It's a very difficult thing to do. But then you also have to occasionally throw out some bones like this. We have an actual chord progression in the background that you can follow along with. And that kind of solace, that kind of peace we're finding with something a bit more sort of familiar and therapeutic, I think it makes sense, you know, like there are connections there. Again, even with how kind of the war kind of sounding like you're in the middle of the Antarctic listening through this, it's still an appreciable theme there. The fact that it hangs for longer than 30 seconds, that we're allowing this space to breathe there where things are a bit more pleasant to listen to, is testament to the self-awareness of MaeBeaNot, knowing full well that while, again, and this is not me being patronizing or facetious, it's just knowing that you can only do so much noise before there needs to be a little bit of additional musicality within it to sort of ground it and contrast things further. What also came to mind, just I suppose before I move on, simply because the comments about the studio production are exactly the same as I've been saying for the rest of the tracks, again, especially with this being an album. There's very good across the board. It's almost like we are kind of giving the listener a lot to take in at once and then kind of rewarding them with a nice moment, which is an interesting approach. A lot of the time people are sort of like almost paranoid about not providing, how do I say this, like a reason, a really sort of like quick, easy reason for someone to listen. But this music is deliberately provocative and challenging, and it's not an easy listen, which is why I think we're kind of rewarding people who get to these points with that. I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, no, honestly, it fades out really neatly. 4 for 4, man. Everything blurs. Oof. Very different. Interesting to have a vocal take at the start. I kind of like how raw and not overproduced that is. Oh, it's seething, dude. And then it just tumbles in a nightmare sequence. I mean, it is blurring together, to be fair. What are we lifting into? I mean, like, what are we lifting into? I liked listening to Everything Blues. I thought it was a really cool track, like, for sure. I liked that it had all those kind of things at the start, the vocals, different sort of instruments. We had like a kind of like melody that went alongside the vocal take. And I like that things are separate at that point. And I think for everything to kind of just veer into this kind of soup to blur together and have that kind of go into the darkness and then come up at the end is almost like saying, oh, we've finally had a bit of happiness, or we've finally gotten some clarity. Everything's okay, oh, and we're back into it again. Structurally fascinating. Again, we clearly understand how to incorporate vocal melodies with other sort of surrounding elements there to add presence and different sort of frequency affectations to things to kind of help them individually stand out. And then we kind of warp them a womp, womp, womp. Again, the LFO going in there, just so intense, dude. Like, I feel like I'm gonna need to take a nap after this because of how intense it was. I feel like my brain's a bit fried. And that's a compliment, because I think that's the kind of effect that MaeBeaNot wants here. I mean, it's definitely not an easy listen, and music doesn't need to be in order to be good music. It's art. But just again, like around the 1 minute mark, we have like one bit kind of glistening like a higher range kind of boom, and there's like a shimmer into it, and the other part is kind of sort of again souping it up down the bottom end and very kind of warbly in the low mids. You just have an uneven kind of expression there that's kind of surreal sounding. And this is a 2.5 minute track there, and arguably there was even more involved in this one despite the form factor. We didn't need to go as hard with this one, but again, we're not taking the listener's attention for granted. And if someone has already listened to the first 4 tracks of this album, it's highly likely they will listen to the next 2. So after the kind of semi-pleasant ending to the 4th track and the 30 seconds of ending to the 3rd one, people might be thinking, oh, okay, with this, we're starting with the happier kind of vocals with the pretty kind of melodies there with the major tone, and then boom, back into the kind of mind melding stuff or mind melting stuff, but just we have not even chromatics there. It's like we have minor triads in these. We're not being deliberately abrasive or dissonant outside the diatonics to a certain extent. It's more that the way that we've done things with like these guitar takes and piano takes and flutes and basses and drums, it's just to soak them in so much that they become alien and completely mutated to make completely original music. And again, we're just playing with the low end bass response there. We're playing with the way things have the high and low ranges put forward there. We're kind of adjusting dynamic range there, like allowing sort of like some parts to be louder, some parts to be smaller. And it's a legato or a portamento kind of thing going on, and maybe even both here, where we don't just have sudden sort of like peaks and troughs. They go up and you ride the waves of the songs within this one. Aside from potentially Nothing But a Heartbeat, where like you could hear the doof, you know. But I just think when I listen back to Everything Blurs, I get the point of the track after listening to it for like the first 30 seconds or so. And I don't think we could have necessarily gotten along with like a 3 or 4 minute track. I just feel like we got the what we needed out of it. We understood that there were different lead elements, and we sung, which was kind of cool there. But we didn't sing notes or sing words, should I say, because we didn't want to provide additional context. It's a completely open experience for the listener. And I think that's important for art, to not over-explain things and to not overcomplicate them. The final track for today, Shepherd's Time. Like, what is that synthesizer? It sounds like a race car, dude. Are we using a flanger or a phaser as well in here to kind of affect the time? Now I'm gonna level with you. I'm not really sure what that has to do with shepherd's time. Whether we're talking about literal sheep or like maybe the shepherd is the leader of the sheep people, you know, people who are sheep, people who just unconditionally sort of absorb and regurgitate information without really critically thinking about it. But what I do know is that sort of like race car texture we have at the start sounds really dope. And we're really committing to the bit of kind of having, again, a really kind of harsh, gritty, electric texture just kind of pushing upwards. We're just so familiar now that it's seen as an accepted normal thing within the space of the album. And as things kind of filter around and float and we go, wah, we rise in pitch with the use of drones and everything like that. Very sort of like, it's powerful stuff. we kind of separate ourselves with that. And a lot of this album is going between sort of droning constant elements there with reverbs overlapping each other, or delays overlapping each other, or both. With the I was like certain sequences kind of taking their time in the sun, and then they kind of fight for attention there, and you've got different voicings without any words being spoken. It kind of sounded like a gutter, like water going down a gutter or something like that around the 30-second mark, and like the low end there. It's incredibly, yeah, I think my brain is melted. I don't know how I would have gone reviewing the entire album in one go. I feel like with this kind of music, you've really got to build stamina with it. That part around the 1:05 mark, though, when things kind of sound like there's like a movie max or some sort of intro where they go or something like that. It's very impressive that we can get that sort of approach to it. But it's so trippy and so disturbing, dude. And then we have the occasional buzz and sort of like white noise there and the hiss of certain staticky elements in that like last minute or so. But you've kind of feel like you've had a lot of what you need to at this point. You've absorbed it and you just got kind of left with the mist surrounding you. And after a few attempts of instruments to kind of buzz or oscillate a little bit higher in the range or something like that, you just left just kind of with the waves washing over you. And I have to give a shout out to MaeBeaNot here. Like legitimately, I have to give a shout out because the fact that we managed to end it like that with a slow fade out, a slow tail is very, very cool structurally. It's like they understood, yeah, the person needs a moment to sort of take this in and understand what's going on. They need that ending like that. They can't just kind of blunt it at the end and have it be kind of like awkward. They need to smooth it out, which is ironic because of how not smooth most of this is. It is an assertive track. It is an assertive listening experience. It says to you, you will either like me or you will not, and that's just what it is. But yeah, ultimately, still very, very cool music. I like the use of the car as well as the plane synths we have with the kind of plane taking off there. Maybe we're using sounds and samples as well as instruments to do this music. I'm not sure, but regardless, just another short form track that had no filler in it. Again, well fleshed out. I'm going to take a moment to think about these tracks and we're going to talk about them in the conclusion. So welcome to the conclusion of my review of these tracks, these 6 tracks off of an album from an act named MaeBeaNot. The album titled The End Never Leaves. This is the part 2 again of this album review, as I've done one previously, the first part. Feel free to check that, links in the description. But in this section, we're going to be providing an overall song analysis or overall sort of album analysis of these 6 tracks from, well, there weren't lyrics and vocals, but I suppose the purpose or what I understand it to be about is, onto production. As well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this album is about? I think this album is discussing what the titles are in word and musical format. This is not an album which is trying to create a catchy groove or even trying to do the literal opposite, I suppose, in the sense of being like kind of grindcore and like, there's some kind of grindcore that's catchy. This is an experience where it's noise and ambience and it is extreme and it is uncompromising and it wants you to accept or absorb what it's sort of trying to provide for you in the most intense way. Well, not the most intense, but a very intense way. It's basically saying, you're open to interpret what these tracks are however way you like, but just so you know, I mean, aside from Nothing But a Heartbeat, where like I kind of understood that the kind of the percussive kind of thuds that you had in the low end, they were sounding like heartbeats, and then the third one had the kind of very pretty kind of major kind of like overtones there from some of the instruments after with the melodies. Like, there are some parts where it's a bit more literal, but ultimately you sort of just kind of figuring stuff out as you go. With a lack of vocals, it's just you're open to interpretation. I feel like most people are going to kind of be able to relate what's going on musically with the title, even if it's it's overwhelming. The tracks are typically between 2.5 to 4 minutes. I feel like it's a good length for them, right in that sweet spot. I think with this kind of music, you got to be really careful to not have the tracks be too long. If that first track, I know it was 4 minutes something, was longer than that, I think it would have been too much. That's not because I think that it was produced, written, or performed badly. I just simply feel like you've just got to kind of let the person know, hey, you get through 4 minutes of this, you either like it or don't, but if you do, we're good to go. This will be the rest of the album, and you got lots to look forward to. And then for people who, maybe to be fair, for people who aren't into this kind of music, having a longer starting track, you just immediately understand whether or not it is for you. and then you either go your separate ways, you know. So I think that the strength of the composition through these 6 tracks is just how non-conformist they are in terms of trying to sort of arrange a structure. There are some tracks where, I mean, to be fair, there's twists and turns in each of the 6, and I've spoken about them and their individual parts there. We just have a wide variety of different bass, synth pad, sequencer, riser elements, as well as heavily effects laden and modulated keyboards and guitars and flutes and drums and basses. And I think we also have like race car and sort of plane sounds, and maybe like an ambulance with like the kind of one of the songs I think we're talking about, Nothing But a Heartbeat or Dying Slowly in Solace, I'm not sure. You just, a lot of these songs are pushing at you in the low end. The sub bass is resonant. You can feel it in the headphones. It's very, it's oppressive. It's claustrophobic. There are some parts, and such as in the end of like Nothing But a Heartbeat and Dying Slowly in Solace, where it becomes very pretty on the other point perspective, that you still sound like you're kind of recorded in the Arctic with the level of reverb you have there and the windiness of it. But it's not like we're trying to sort of like have it, it's not heavy all the time. It just, there are moments where it kind of eases off a little bit. Even in the first track, Happiness is a Foreign Concept, I think, to allow for the second part just to sort of accept those kind of distorted kind of vocal parts there very cleanly. But I did also like that we had vocals, I think, in Everything Blurs at the start. They're just the vocals kind of run a melody there that harmonize nearly with the synths underneath it. Like we know, I think, the balance and equilibrium required in order to make this kind of music, to understand that there needs to be that dynamic range that changes between the quiet and loud notes in order to make it bearable for people who aren't as familiar with it. Whilst also, again, being uncompromising for people that vibe with it on a regular basis. I don't know what else to say about the actual performances on the instruments, because it's not even necessarily trying to relate so much to a rhythm. Like, there were certain elements which had a rhythm that about quarters or 8s or even 30 seconds, again, at the end of Nothing But a Heartbeat. Like, we explore individual musical ideas that are insected and form a really sort of like rather sophisticated tapestry considering the situation. But a lot of this is simply allowing the synths to kind of have their LFOs go wom, 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 and kind of bring things up and down. And even in those cleaner sections, you have these kind of drones or these constant notes there that kind of push across there. We understand how to put different rhythms in music. We also know how to kind of have stuff just exist and be either quiet or loud or abrasive or sweet sounding. We are flexible with our approach to songwriting. And there are some major and minor elements there, as well as some Phrygians and sort of like diatonic parts. There are chromatics, I think, for the state of either being deliberately sort of like abrasive or unexpected there. But ultimately, it's music that encourages you to figure it out and form your own opinion rather than leads you by the nose. It is loud, but there is automation in terms of like the dynamic range again. Like the studio recording, like thematically, it really does just depend on the track. I think we're typically we've got a style of production that is consistent across all 6, and we're sort of just trying to, I suppose, give hints with the ideas of what it could be about without being too blatant about it or too obvious. I like the fact that it's not, again, trying to explain things, but the studio recording, mixing and mastering is good. Any vocals or synth leads or any instruments that are included, any affected flutes or bass or drums or guitars or keys or anything like that are presented in a way where they are unique. They might be mutated, they might be monstrous, they might be more sort of charming and low key. But we know typically how to balance them within the frequency spectrum. Any resonant frequencies, again, such as the sub bass pushing at you, are deliberate. Some stuff's cut completely just to sort of make it sort of niche well with others. There is both symmetry and asymmetry in the stereo field. Things are not even on the sides of the stereo field sometimes, and that's okay. It makes more interesting. We're not being too obvious with our choices there. But we also have things kind of fill up the stereo field now, where sometimes we're surrounded by the music, and it's not just from like a 2D perspective. I think also there's some 3D mixing and stuff where it sounds like it's going around the back or something like that. Just ultimately just really, really solid music there. Clearly well thought out, no complaints at all. I love it to pieces. And I like that it was again challenging And I like that MaeBeaNot is not feeling the need to cater to the people that listen to them and they're just making their own stuff. I genuinely dig that. It's just knowing that we're gonna have a specific niche audience and it's just what it is, and that's okay. You don't need to be liked by everyone. Nice and loud, there's pumping, fast compression limiting is handled. There's dynamic range and sort of like change in loudness and fade outs as well at the end with some of the tracks, which are really cool. And I've got no real applicable constructive critique. I think again, the length of the tracks, especially some of them where it was starting to get really ferocious, having a shorter form factor is good. From a general listener's perspective, again, I mentioned that I like that it's trying to deliberately not to cater to the audience. I just think you just need to bear in mind listening to this music that it's gonna eat away at you a bit. And I think that if you're comfortable with this kind of stuff, like it's good. For people, for myself personally, I don't know if I'd listen to this on a regular basis, but that's not saying it's lacking musicality or that I disliked it. I just think it's a very occasional listen thing. I think that it's very much a mood-based thing. I feel like there's beauty hidden within it, but it is uncomfortable, and I don't feel great after listening to it, primarily because, in part, it kind of illustrates that the person who made it might have been going through some really horrific stuff, and I feel bad that they've had to go through that. I suppose it springs a bit of empathy, which is, technically a connection made via music, and I feel like if nothing else, that's an extremely positive thing. So thank you for watching my review of these 6 tracks off an album from MaeBeaNot titled The End Never Leaves Part 2. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I will catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.